All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started, and then if other people join, they will join. So welcome everybody. I think most of you have been here, at least at some of the other presentations, but this is part of the presentations of Open Education Week. Excited that you're here. There are more presentations. We invite you to check them out that you can go see. So this is being recorded, and it will be posted onto the ISU's Library's YouTube channel for future viewing if you want to come back and look at it. Following the presentation, we'll have a question and answer period where you can unmute yourselves and ask a question, or if you'd like to post a question in the chat, you can do that as well, whatever works. It's pretty low key that way. But let's jump in. This is Sonali Salunkhe, is that right? Okay,
yes.
Sorry about that. From the College of Business with a focus in healthcare administration. Dr. Sonali Salunkhe is an assistant professor of healthcare administration at the Idaho State University College of Business. She has a medical background and holds a doctoral degree in health management and policy. She started working at Idaho State in the fall of 2023. She taught an OER course for the first time in the fall of 2024. In her experience, the adoption of the OER was very beneficial for students because it takes off some of the financial burden for them and also contributes to improved accessibility of course materials for them. So we're excited to have her here, and I will mute myself and give you the mic. So go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Watkins, for the introduction. So hello, everyone. Like Dr. Watkins mentioned, I am Sonali Salunkhe. I am an assistant professor of healthcare administration here at ISU College of Business. And like he said, I taught an OER course for the first time last fall. So in this short presentation, I will share with you all how I implemented the OER course. So let's get started. So before we dive in, let's see what is OER. So Open Educational Resources, or OER, these are materials or resources that are freely accessible. These are openly licensed. So these resources can be used for teaching, research, or any other educational purposes. Now let's talk a bit about the advantages of using OER. Let's first talk about the advantages of OER for the students. The first foremost is that students have free access to all the study materials for the course. These are available for free 24/7. And depending upon the OER chosen, it can also have videos or it can have other interactive learning material that can foster student engagement, which is really helpful for students. Now, what about the advantages of OER for faculty? OER enables faculty to find the most current content to students and bring it to students for free. Faculty can also choose the study content from different free resources, and they are not restricted to just one resource to be used for the course. This way, we are able to include only the information that the students need in order to meet the course learning outcomes for that particular course. So let's talk about how I implemented the OER. So here are the steps that I took to implement the OER in HCA 4475 and 5575. This is Healthline Bioethics for both undergrad and grad. I was going to teach the course for the first time last fall. So that's when I decided, yes, this is the time because I was creating the syllabus and I should think about using OER. So the first step that I took was to go over the course learning outcomes to know what the students are expected to learn from the course. Now, depending on the course learning outcomes, I decided that the study materials required for this particular course would be texts and research papers as they would align well with the course structure. The next step was to find the most appropriate OER. During this step, the first thing I did was reached out to the ISU librarians and the ITRC staff to request for assistance in searching the OER material for my course. They directed me to the various resources that are shared on the university website. So I used OpenStax, I used OER Commons, and I also used Moodle. Next, I scheduled multiple one-on-one meetings with both ISU librarians and ITRC staff to review the materials, and they especially helped me understand the policies of Creative Commons license. Now, this is very crucial to ensure if the material is free to use by everyone and if the material can be even shared with others. Next step was, after reviewing the multiple resources, I finally finalized an OER textbook or a press book that I was going to use for the course. The next step was to ensure that the content in the Pressbook or the OER textbook aligned with the course learning outcomes and the learning activities and the assessments that I was going to use. This is when I realized that there were still a few topics that were not covered by this Pressbook. So I supplemented the OER textbook with research papers to cover the content that was not discussed in the textbook. So in short, I customized all the study materials so that they align with all the course learning outcomes for the course. The next step was to integrate those OER materials into the course and the LMS. The ITRC staff, I will mention, went above and beyond to help me in adding the OER content into the LMS, that is the Moodle. I added the OER textbook link, that is the Pressbook link, into the syllabus. But what I did is that I also added an URL for a specific chapter in each of the weekly modules on Moodle. So this way, students were able to access the chapter from the weekly module on Moodle, and it made very accessible to them. They could use it anytime. Last but not the least, the most important step is feedback from students. I sought feedback from students after their midterm exam, as well as the annual student evaluations, that is the course evals that they complete, were helpful in providing me with the student feedback. It was from the feedback that I realized the students really appreciated the OER textbook. While the implementation phase sounds very smooth, I would also like to share a few challenges that I encountered along the way during this phase. First was searching an appropriate high quality OER material that aligns with the course learning outcomes. It can be very time consuming. It's not a very easy process. Next, you may or may not have instructor resources along with the OER material. So something for you to consider is you might have to build the entire course all by yourself just from the material. While I was worried about embedding the OER into the LMS, the instructional designers, like I mentioned earlier already, were incredibly helpful. I also think another potential challenge could be that some students might prefer a physical copy of the textbook over an online copy of the Pressbook. So overall, in my experience, the adoption of OER was very beneficial for students. It took off the financial burden because it was free of cost. It also contributed to improved accessibility of course materials for them. So it's beneficial for both students and faculty. I think with that, I will open the floor to any questions that you may have for me.
Thank you for that, Sonali. Does anyone have any initial questions that they're curious about? You can also write them in the chat if you prefer not to speak up.
I'll start. Sonali, you mentioned it is a burdensome and slightly overwhelming process to find OER since it's in so many different repositories and you have to piece together your own course. How did you overcome this challenge, or how did you meet the challenge, I guess?
The first step, literally the first step, was I reached out to ISU librarian. The second appointment I scheduled was with the ITRC staff. So these were very pivotal for me to even direct me where should I go, to look for resources. That's when I started with the OpenStax. I looked at OER Commons, and an instructional designer recommended using Merlot. That's where I found the Pressbook that I used eventually for my course. I think I did not know much about the Creative Commons license, and that is something I learned a lot during this entire process. Reaching out that, yes, it seems like OER, but is it really OER? Can I use it or no? And that's how, the different symbols and things that are used to show that, yes, there is a Creative Commons license. Yes, you can adapt. Yes, you can share. Yes, you can, add things to it as you see fit and so on. So I think that's where I started. And then I started exploring. I rather had 2 or 3 potential Pressbooks and one of the course that I thought I would use. That's when I scheduled a meeting again to ensure that are these something that I can even use or no? And that's how I narrowed down to the Pressbook that I eventually ended up using. But like I said, even the Pressbook did not have all the content that I wanted to cover in the course. So I supplemented with the research papers. And then, I used the link from the ISU library to give those research papers so that students have access to it.
So you linked directly to the papers.
Yes, I provided the ISU library link for the papers, even a URL for the textbook chapter of the Pressbook. So this way it was very accessible for the students. So they go in, let's say week 3 module on Moodle. So they just click on the URL and this way they go to the Pressbook instead of giving a PDF or anything.
Wonderful.
Thank you for helping me.
Oh, I remember that meeting now.
Spencer was asking in the chat, did you say that the textbook was on Modlo, M-O-D-L-O?
No, it's Merlot, MERLOT.
Oh, okay.
That's what I use, Merlot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for clarifying that.
Mm-hmm.
Did your OER, did it come with, I was curious about like assignments and activities. Was that built into your OER or did you already have that ready to go from previous classes, or how did that work for you?
So I adopted just a Pressbook. So I created the PowerPoint presentations from the textbook chapter. I created the assignments and there were case studies that students worked on. So these were actual case studies. So those did not come with the textbook, but I supplemented, depending upon the content that we were covering each week is what the discussion questions or the quizzes or the exam or the case studies. So I had to supplement a lot of things. So no, to answer your question, it did not have instructional resources.
I'd like to follow up on that question just a little bit. I think that's a good one. So with the previous textbook, I mean, I'm assuming that you taught this class with a textbook that cost money. Is that correct?
No, I did not. So there was another professor that was teaching this course before and he used a textbook. I taught last fall is when I decided, because I was going to build the course again. So that's when I decided that, I would like to see if there are good OER options to begin with. And that's
Okay.
how the whole process started.
So this was your first time teaching the class?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. So I guess my question was that with the previous textbook, did it have some of those materials like test questions or like quiz questions or something? So
I cannot be 100% sure, but typically textbooks usually have some, instructor resources available. But like I said, the cost of the textbook can be anywhere between $60 to $100, just to give you a ballpark, to avoid that cost and at the same time not compromise on any, course content that I want to cover. That's the reason I started looking for. Otherwise, there were a couple of textbooks that are there. But then again, healthcare is changing every day. So, it's very important to stay current. And so even if you use a textbook, you're more than likely to use research papers and other articles to supplement what is going on currently in healthcare. So it's not just either or, it's usually everything together so that it becomes a comprehensive course, so to say.
oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so wow, it seems like you did a lot of work and your students have really benefited from that, and I hope they appreciate that.
Yes, yes. So after the midterm exam, I usually meet with all my students to see where they are and to go over, where they are in the course and what is working, what's not working for them. And that's when I asked for their feedback on, the use of OER, and they said they really appreciated the OER, especially because it's online. You can literally open anywhere with just a click and you can start reading. It's not something that you have to carry the physical copy of the textbook anywhere, and it's free. So it was great for them.
How many students, may I ask, were enrolled in the class?
I think it was approximately 40.
Oh, wow. That's a good sized class.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question.
So you mentioned it was like a press book and that some students prefer physical copies. Did this have an option to get a physical copy, or was it purely
No,
online?
I just provided the link of the press book, the syllabus, and the press book was very neatly organized because it had table of contents and you could just click on the chapter and it would take you there. But what I did is, let's say I wanted students to read chapter 5. So I actually clicked on chapter 5, went to that page and copied that URL into the weekly module. So this way, when students click, they don't go to the table of contents, they actually go to chapter 5 directly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I thought that struck something with you because I've had a few students over the years now that I've been using OER that occasionally have a similar problem. They have a really hard time reading online and they want a physical book. And that was something that surprised me. So I was just curious if you'd run into that at all, if there was any options, but that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the reason I mentioned that as a potential challenge that I see. Some students might really prefer a physical, textbook copy, but it's not something that students told me that they missed,
Oh, okay. So it's
I
just
don't
something you
know.
were predicting.
Yeah, but at the same time, I do know that this could be a potential challenge for some students, that it's not a physical.
Totally. Yeah, that makes sense. It's only happened like once or twice, where a student had requested to get a physical copy, and I thought that was interesting. Unfortunately, the one I had didn't have one either, but I have had some that do, so I was just curious about that. Does anybody else have any questions?
No, congratulations on your work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It is so rewarding, when students benefit. It's just a very, in overall, a very rewarding experience. The whole process becomes very rewarding when students benefit from it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you had an assessment and you specifically, if you didn't specifically ask about the use of the OER and they provided feedback, but did you actually ask a question about
Yeah, so, like I said, after the midterm exam, I usually do one-on-one meetings with the students, and that's where I ask them the question that, we are using OER textbook, how do you find it? And they were like, oh yeah, yes, that is great because it's free and we can access it. And that's how I knew from, at least the midpoint that yes, this is working for the students. And then even the student evals, the course evals, they also mentioned some things along these lines that they appreciated it.
Yeah, implementing that assessment is really helpful. I mean, that's really great advice. Thank you for that. Wonderful.
Thank you.
This has been really enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah, it has. It sounds like a great example of how to use OER. So thanks for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. Like I said, the ISU librarians and instructional designers, they helped me a lot. I was so worried about, can I even use this? How do I put it into the LMS? But they all went above and beyond in helping me. So that was great.
Did you have to end up being choosy with which chapters you used, or were you able to kind of just use the book as a whole, or did it take a lot of what am I looking for? A word here, but for you to
Customize.
sort through. Yeah, customize, that'll work.
No, I used the entire textbook, but I also added in some more. So there were some healthcare ethics related topics that were not covered, which I wanted students to learn in order to meet the course outcomes. So those I supplemented. And, there are so many laws that are different across different states. So, that's some information that I had to supplement it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
great.
Have you required students to purchase a book in other classes? And if so, could you give us a sense for your understanding? Do you think that students are more likely to read the required reading if it's from an OER or from a cost-based one? I don't know if there's any evidence for that, but if you know, if you can give us a sense, maybe that might be interesting.
I cannot really speak to that because I did not evaluate like an intervention and a control group, you know, so to say that this is what this not.
Mhm.
But I do teach a couple of other courses where students are required to purchase a textbook. And one thing I can say is there is usually a challenge at the start of the semester because not everybody has the textbook, especially in the first initial weeks, first, you know, 1 to 3 weeks. So that issue is overcome if you have an, you know, an OER textbook. So this way, you know, students have access to the study material right from day one. Otherwise, many a time students say that, you know, they have ordered the textbook, they don't have it, or, you know, are there any other options? Is there an ebook for this? These are some kinds of questions that students come up with, but I don't know about the reading aspect that you're asking. Would it differ?
No, that's good information. Thank you.
All right. Does anybody else have anything else they want to ask? Okay. Well, thank you so
Very
much,
good.
Sonali.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And if you want to check out some more presentations, happy to have you on board. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
There.
Bye.
Bye.